Hello world, welcome back to Razor RC. Wanted to shoot a video about something a lot of people have been asking me about, and that is what is better, the TLR 22X-4 four-wheel drive buggy or the team associated B74. And so I spent pretty much the whole day at the track, at my local carpet track, basically running both of these cars back to back, doing some setup, doing some tuning, and just trying to get a better feel for these vehicles, because the 22X4 has been out for a couple months, but I've only been able to run it for the last couple weeks, so I've been spending a lot of time with this buggy. And then the B74 actually hadn't ran in like 6 months, and only very limited amount of time on carpet. Most of my experience with the B74 has been on indoor clay dirt. I've had it since it came out over a year ago, so I have a lot of experience with B74, but not a lot on carpet. And so I wanted to try these and figure out, kind of better understand how these actually run. So first off, I'm not a pro driver or anything. I'm just your regular average Joe, but I do spend a lot of time just thinking about the vehicles and also trying to focus on, kind of their inherent differences. So these vehicles, again, are also not set up exactly the same. They've got different tires and wheels and electronics and stuff like that, but I'm not really talking about the power or the servos or whatever. There are different electronics, but just focusing more on basically on how they drive. Now, a big part of how a vehicle drives, pretty much almost everything having to do with how a vehicle drive actually is set up. So personally, I've always been a fan of the Frank Root setup, so I'm running the Frank Root carpet setup. It's a little bit different than the stock kit carpet setup. Some of the parts are different, but I am running the entire setup, including the X-ray springs and everything. The only difference is I was running a 1.8 millimeter rear sway bar because I didn't have a second 2.0. So that's the only slight difference. And I do actually think I highly recommend you get 2 sets of the 2.0 sway bars. I tried kind of both combinations, the 2.0 in the front or the 2 on the rear and the 1.8 on the other side. And if you only have one set, stick the 2.0 on the front and the 1.8 on the back. It does drive slightly better that way. On the Team Associate side, I'm running the Dustin Evans carpet setup. I'm also a big fan of Dustin Evans's, I guess, setups or driving style or whatever you want to call it. They've always worked well for me, and I do think his particular setup is actually pretty good. So let's kind of get into the vehicles. So I ran the 22X4 most of the time, and just trying to get a better feel for the vehicle. Was messing around with like the dog bone position and stuff like that, the sway bars, etc. I did actually find that a B74 sway bar will fit on the rear, so I actually mounted up a 2.0 sway bar from a B74 on the rear. Haven't got a chance to run it like that. I was just running the 1.8 TLR part, but I think that will actually run pretty well. So first off, 22X4 out of the box, tons and tons of steering. I mean, this car is really, really fast, and pretty much every facet of how it drives. I'm talking about acceleration is ridiculous, the steering is ridiculous, the way it carries corner speed is ridiculous. It's really weird because even though this car has a longer wheelbase than my B74, sort of as it's set up, I mean, you can kind of tell just by looking them side to side, the 22X4 looks longer, but it drives like it's much, much shorter car. It drives like the rear wheels are like somewhere around here. They just follow the front wheels. Like, I don't know, it's crazy like how much corner speed, and like it's almost like the car gets out of the corner before your brain can actually think. And so I was actually watching a live stream with Ryan Dunford and Thomas Tran last night, and Thomas Tran was talking about this vehicle, and the words he uses, he said that this car is faster than him. And if you watch my first drive video of this vehicle, my first impressions, I pretty much said the same thing. I mean, it wasn't as direct, but I did say I felt like this car was like faster than I'm able to drive. It really is that way. So that there's tons of pluses, because this is a car that is probably more capable than most drivers out there. I mean, certainly myself, I can definitely say I'm not running this thing at its full potential. There is more speed, more time, everything within this vehicle that I'm not getting. I'm just not able to I guess wheel or pilot this vehicle as fast as I think it can actually go. So definitely makes you step up your game. Now on the downside, it does feel pretty twitchy. It does feel very aggressive. I dialed down the speed on my steering, I think -10 on my Sanwa MT4S, so -10 on the forward, -10 on the return. And it definitely made it a lot more docile because this thing is insanely fast. I mean, I think part of it is just kind of the steering geometry, but they said they found some stuff, you know, kind of in the design of this vehicle. And while it looks, you know, if you just kind of pop off the body, it looks very similar to the Team Associate. I mean, you know, a lot of people say, oh, it's just a copy of the X-Ray, it's a copy of the B74, the Yokomo, whatever. You know, everyone's saying that these vehicles are looking very similar, and they do. I mean, you know, the layout is almost identical, but it drives completely different. So, I mean, I was excited about that because it'd be pretty boring if every vehicle felt the same, drove the same. And they definitely did figure out something in this vehicle. I don't know what it is. I think they've got a narrow pivot. They did definitely lighten the vehicle quite a bit. But for whatever reason, it just, the rear wheels follow the front wheels. That's the only best way I can kind of explain how this actually drives. So, it is fast. It is absurdly capable. But you do have to bring your A game. So I think what Thomas said, you know, where this vehicle, you know, kind of feels better, faster than he is, I think is a really good, you know, sort of direct explanation on how it drives. So the shocks are also incredible, way better than the B74 shocks. There's just no comparison in kind of the plushness and the smoothness of these shocks. I've always felt TLR shocks are better than Associated shocks, and I think that's the case here. Just generates tons of grip. I even ran kind of the same tires on both. Like I ran these Prism, I think these are Prism 2.0s or something like that. Ran them on the TLR, and the TLR could use that traction. It's kind of ridiculous. I mean, as much traction as you throw on this thing, it will actually be able to use. Now, I am trying to dial it down, kind of tone it down a little bit. So I'm running, you know, sort of worn out mini pin ones here on the back, Schumacher tires. I think these, I forget what these are in the front. But yeah, I'm kind of taming this thing down is kind of the direction I'm heading because it is just really fast. So that's kind of how the 22X-4, the best example and explanation I can give. This motor is like crazy fast too. That's part of it. But when I first drove it, you know, I thought it was just me and I just, you know, forgot how to drive or something like that. But the vehicle is super fast. You know, I drove this after having a long layoff, you know, not having driven in months, and just kind of shocked at how fast this thing goes. Like, it's faster than your brain can kind of keep up, in my opinion. Anyways, so now under the Team Associate B74, like I said, most of my experience was on dirt, indoor clay, and so I threw on the full Dustin Evans setup, including the slipper, and I'm running an 8.5 turn motor, which is pretty fast for a small track. But yeah, this drives completely different. I would say this is actually pretty tame, pretty docile, and maybe not quite using as much of the traction that is available. So like these same tires I was running off the 22X4, I threw them on the B74, and they were sliding a little bit more. So it made it easier to drive because this one, you know, there's just too much traction. Honestly, I need to actually tame it down and probably remove it a little traction. I'm still working on that setup. But this guy, you know, it was just really easy to drive. I mean, these tires maybe are not quite as aggressive or something. I mean, everything kind of slid a little bit more, but it's a little bit more safe. You know, would never traction roll. It would not accelerate quite as hard. Obviously, it's a different motor. But I feel like the drivetrain, I don't know what it is. Like, I'm running ceramic bearings on this. I'm just running the regular oiled bearings on this. But this thing does not, you know, hit quite as hard. Even though, I mean, the bigger motor obviously helps. But I think overall, power-wise, you know, this thing just seems faster. I'm not sure what it is exactly, what they figured out. But it just, you yank on the throttle and this thing just goes. It's kind of crazy. You know, I'm sure some of it has to do with the lightness of the vehicle. I think it's somewhere around 40-50 grams lighter than the Team Associated, running like equivalent electronics and stuff. I think I made a post about that on RC Tech, just kind of talking about both vehicles with similar electronics, and I just kind of weighed all the electronics, and it came out to me about, I don't know, I forget exactly, 30, 40, 50 grams, something lighter than the B74. And this has actually got the lightweight body, while the TLR's got just the regular, I think they call it the light body, but it's not, it's still heavier than this one. This is a ultralight body, I guess, out of the box. So B74 is easier to drive the way it's set up. I feel like I make fewer mistakes with this. You know, like I said, the 22X4, it's just faster than I can drive right now. And so I'm just kind of learning, improving, and trying to use up all that corner speed and acceleration and go fast. It's sort of inherent in that vehicle. Whereas this one, it feels heavier, it feels slower, it feels a little lazier. And some of it has to do with just the weight, I think. But even with that stronger motor, the way it just kind of reacts overall is a little bit more tame. Now, I will say that I do not have the latest B74 upgrade, so they did release a new steering rack, which, you know, having driven these back to back, I think is probably going to be a good idea to pick up. I think they changed the geometry of the Ackerman or something like that, because there's something weird about the steering. I think somewhere in like the mid corner, it just kind of starts understeering a little bit. So probably something about the Ackerman rate is slightly off, and probably gets fixed by that. They also did change the outdrive, so they released some shorter outdrives, I think, to prevent some of that dog bone outdrive chipping issue they had. So if you're not that familiar with the B74, you do have to run some limiters in the shocks to prevent the angle from being too steep and basically having these dog bones rubbing up against that outdrive. So they do make shorter outdrives. It's probably a good idea to pick those up. I have not picked up those parts, so I think those would actually make a difference, especially that Ackerman bar setting. So yeah, hopefully that explains it a little bit. B74, you know, I've already done reviews and stuff like that, so hopefully you already have a better understanding of that. Is the 22X-4 better than the B74, or is the Associate still the king? It's too soon to tell, honestly. I have bent a shock shaft on my 22X-4. I smashed into something. I'm not exactly sure when that actually bent, but I did notice it was bent, and so yeah, I did replace that. One of the big problems with 22X-4 right now is it's really hard to get parts, so that is going to be a problem. Team Associates stuff, of course, it is generally much easier to get parts. Sometimes things go out of stock, and so yeah, the sway bar is something I need, so that's why I kind of hooked up a B74 sway bar there in the rear. But yeah, overall, yeah, both are really good kits. You know, they're quite different, so I think at this point it just kind of depends a little more on what you're looking for. The B74 is still a safe option. I don't think it's outdated or, you know, completely you know, uncompetitive or whatever. I think it's still a very good vehicle, still has the durability, and with those kind of fixes probably drives a lot better. 22X-4 is an animal. I mean, if you have the skills, I do think the 22X-4 will throw down faster lap times. So I need to put these on the clock and get a little bit better feeling for my lap times, but I'm still working on setup, and as that improves, actually my times I'm sure will improve as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a teaser on how these vehicles drive. A lot of people have been asking me for this, and so I'm going to do a full comparison, you know, heads up, pick a winner type thing in the future. Probably throw in some other vehicles like the Techno, the HB Racing, the Schumacher, all those guys. I have owned or have access to pretty much every four-wheel drive buggy out there, so we'll try to include as many as possible. So hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely hit the like, share, subscribe button. Share with your friends. Throw down a comment, you know, if you have thoughts or questions about these vehicles, and I'll try to answer them as best I can. They're both really good vehicles, so I don't think there's really a loser between these two. I hope you enjoyed it, and look for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.